We won't stop. We will continue to investigate and follow any lines of inquiry that we currently have.
I think there is a chance. It's probably fairly slim, but there is a chance, which is why I'm going out there.
Gus is a little 4-year-old, blonde, curly hair, smiling face.
The wind moves across the South Australian outback like a whisper, carrying secrets. Dust dances over red soil. The land stretches endlessly, flat, empty, and quiet. And somewhere in that vast silence, a grandmother's voice breaks through, trembling but steady. "We're devastated by the disappearance of our beloved Gus," she says. "Nearly 90 hours since he was last seen, and we still believe there's a chance." Her words hang heavy in the dry air. Not just a plea, but a promise. Because this isn't just another story of loss. It's the story of a child who vanished in a place where there is nowhere to hide. No dense forest, no busy street, just open country, red dirt, and questions that refuse to fade. 4-year-old Gus Lamont disappeared from a remote cattle station in the Australian Outback, and no one can explain how. No footprints, no sound, no trace. In a land where visibility stretches for miles, Gus seemed to vanish into thin air. Tonight we hear from the one person who has stayed silent, until now. The grandmother who refuses to give up hope, and the haunting mystery that's left an entire nation asking, how does a child disappear in open land with nowhere to hide? Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Every click helps keep this story alive. It was the kind of quiet evening the Outback is known for. Endless sky, the soft hum of wind, and the fading gold of sunset brushing against the red earth. On September 27th, at a remote property called Oak Park Station, 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last seen playing near a small pile of red sand, just meters from his family's home. His grandmother, Josie Murray, remembers the moment too clearly. She just stepped inside to grab something from the kitchen. A minute, maybe 2, that's all it took. When she came back out, the yard was still. No laughter, no sound of tiny feet in the dirt, just the wind. At first, she thought he'd wandered behind one of the sheds or towards the water tank. They called his name, once, twice, over and over. "Gus! Gus!" But the land didn't answer. By the time the sun slipped below the horizon, panic began to set in. Flashlights cut across the dusty paddocks. Every shadow was checked. Every fence line walked. Neighbors joined, then police. What began as a small family search quickly grew into a massive effort stretching through the night. But as hours passed and temperatures dropped, the hope of a quick reunion turned into something else, fear. Because this wasn't a crowded city or a thick forest. This was open country. You could see for miles in every direction. So how could a 4-year-old boy, barefoot and wearing light clothing, simply vanish? And then came the question that still haunts this case today. If Gus didn't walk away, what happened to him? The call went out at 8:30 p.m., a missing child at Oak Park Station. Within hours, one of the largest search operations in South Australia's history was underway. Police, state emergency service crews, Indigenous trackers, and volunteers from nearby towns all converged on the property. Helicopters circled overhead through the night, their spotlights cutting white beams across the red earth. By dawn, the land was alive with movement. Search parties spaced in grids, radio chatter echoing through the silence, and drones scanning from above. They searched every dam, every dry creek bed, every stretch of scrub. Even divers were brought in to sweep the water holes. Nothing. By day 3, searchers had covered more than 140 square kilometers, a space so vast it could swallow cities whole. Still no sign of Gus. Then, a flicker of hope. A small footprint was discovered roughly 500 meters from the homestead. For a moment, hearts lifted. Maybe this was it. Maybe Gus was close. But forensic teams couldn't confirm it was his. And that single uncertainty shifted the entire mood of the operation. Each day that passed brought a harsher reality. The heat climbed above 30 degrees Celsius. Nights dropped near freezing. For a 4-year-old without food, water, or shelter, survival chances grew smaller by the hour. Still, no one gave up. Convoys arrived from the nearest town of Yunta, just 60 residents strong, bringing fresh supplies, more volunteers, and unshakable hope. But hope can be fragile. After 8 relentless days, the tone changed. Search commanders gathered the family. They spoke quietly, carefully, and they said what no one wanted to hear. We may not be able to find him alive. Professional advice from survival experts and medics made it clear the conditions were too extreme. The official search was scaled back. But the family didn't stop. Josie Murray, Gus's grandmother, said through tears, "We're not giving up, not ever." Even as trucks pulled away and the hum of engines faded into silence, she stood there, watching the horizon, the same horizon that had swallowed her grandson whole. Grief moves differently when there are no answers. It doesn't come in waves, it just lingers, heavy and unrelenting. For the Lamont and Murray families, the days after the search scaled back were unbearable. The house that once echoed with a little boy's laughter now sat in aching silence. Gus's toys were still scattered across the porch. His favorite hat hung by the door. Each morning, his grandmother Josie would stand at the window, staring toward the red horizon, as if sheer willpower could bring him home. Reporters came, cameras rolled, but Josie's voice rarely broke. Only once did she speak publicly, saying, "We're devastated by the disappearance of our beloved Gus. It's been nearly 90 hours since he was last seen, and we still believe there's a chance." That small sentence, "there's a chance," carried the entire family's strength. Because in the Outback, hope isn't naive, it's survival. Online, people followed the story closely. Social media filled with messages of support, prayers, and heartbreak. But there were also whispers, cruel speculation, armchair detectives accusing and dissecting every detail. The family, already broken, pulled back from the public eye. Josie and her partner Shannon asked for privacy, not to hide, but to heal. They had already given everything they could to the search. Now, they just wanted peace, and maybe one small sign that Gus was still out there somewhere. Because even after the searchers left, Josie never stopped listening to the wind, hoping somehow it might carry her grandson's name back home. When a child disappears, theories grow like weeds, fast, tangled, and often impossible to separate from truth. In the case of 4-year-old Gus Lamont, 3 main possibilities have haunted investigators, locals, and online communities alike. Each one brings its own questions, and its own contradictions. Theory 1. He wandered off and succumbed to the elements. It's the simplest, and according to police, the most likely. Children that age are curious, impulsive, easily distracted. Perhaps Gus chased something, a bird, a sound, or the wind itself, and walked further than anyone imagined. The terrain was unforgiving, sharp spinifex grass, loose rocks, and dry creek beds stretching for miles. Temperatures swung from searing heat during the day to near freezing at night. Even for an adult, survival beyond a few days would be nearly impossible. But here's the problem. Search crews covered over 140 square kilometers, with helicopters, drones, canines, and indigenous trackers. Not a single piece of clothing, footprint, or human trace was found. No signs of wildlife disturbance. No scent trail. Nothing. It's as if the desert itself swallowed him whole, silently, completely. Theory 2. He fell into an unseen hazard. South Australia's outback is scattered with old mine shafts, abandoned wells, and animal burrows that collapse under pressure. Some searchers believed Gus may have stumbled into one, but investigators mapped and inspected all known hazards within several kilometers. Not a single opening near Oak Park Station matched the timeline or conditions. Even ground-penetrating radar was deployed. Still nothing. So if he fell, it wasn't anywhere the experts could find. Theory 3. Human involvement. This one unsettled everyone, not because it seemed likely, but because it couldn't be ruled out. Could someone have taken Gus? Could an unknown vehicle have approached unseen, snatched him, and vanished into the desert roads? Again, the facts resist this theory. No tire tracks were found. No witnesses reported unfamiliar vehicles. The property is remote, accessible by one main dirt road visible from the house. For an abductor to arrive, take a child, and leave without detection would require impossible timing and precision. Yet, in the absence of evidence, speculation thrives. Online forums filled with wild theories, some pointing fingers at strangers, others unfairly at family. But police repeatedly confirmed, no one in the Lamont or Murray family is considered a suspect. And then there's the silence. The kind that unsettles even seasoned officers. A senior police commander said quietly, "We've found nothing to tell us where Gus is, or what happened to him." That statement, simple, blunt, devastating, captures the entire case. Because for every theory that offers an answer, another detail tears it apart. If Gus wandered, where's the trail? If he fell, where's the site? If he was taken, where's the evidence? It leaves one unbearable possibility, that something happened out there in the outback, that science and search grids simply can't explain. And until the land itself gives up its secret, All anyone can do is keep asking, where is Gus Lamont? Then, just when hope had nearly faded, when the red dust of the outback had settled into quiet resignation, something shifted. It began with a voice, not from police or media, but from within the Lamont family itself. Gus's grandmother, Margaret Lamont, who had stayed largely silent throughout the ordeal, finally spoke publicly, her tone steady, but eyes full of a kind of grief that only time can carve. She sat before reporters in her modest kitchen, the desert sun leaking through the window behind her. And what she said changed the conversation entirely. "I don't believe Gus just wandered off," she said. "I believe someone knows what happened. And they're still out there." Her words landed like a tremor. Because until that moment, the family had aligned with the official theory that Gus had simply gotten lost. But now, Margaret hinted at something deeper. Something she claimed she had been told not to say before. She described how, days before Gus vanished, a white ute had been seen idling near the property, a vehicle no one recognized. Locals had mentioned it to police, but it never made it into any official statement. And suddenly that tiny detail, a car in the wrong place at the wrong time, reignited the case. Search teams were reassembled. Police reopened lines of inquiry. But again, nothing definitive surfaced. Still, Margaret's statement rekindled national attention. People began to wonder if there had been too much focus on the landscape, and not enough on the human side of the mystery. In that moment, the story of a missing boy became something else. A question not only of where Gus went, but of who might know why. And once that question entered the public's mind, there was no turning back. In the weeks following Margaret's statement, the story of Gus Lamont rippled far beyond the dusty roads of remote Australia. What began as a local search for a missing child had now become a national reckoning. A reminder of how quickly innocence can vanish, and how deeply a community can ache in silence. Authorities confirmed they were pursuing several lines of inquiry, though no arrests were made. The official statement described the investigation as active and ongoing, but those closest to the case said otherwise, that things had gone quiet again. Too quiet. Meanwhile, the Lamont family was left to pick up what little remained of normal life. Margaret withdrew from interviews. Gus's mother stopped answering calls from journalists. And the once crowded search grounds grew empty, save for the occasional local who left flowers, small toys, or handwritten prayers near the place he was last seen. Online, hashtags like #FindGusLamont and #OutbackMystery began trending. Strangers thousands of miles away sent messages of love and frustration, angry that a child could disappear without trace in such a vast open land. And yet, despite the noise, the truth remains buried, somewhere between memory and the red earth that swallowed a little boy's footprints. For some, it's just another mystery. For the Lamont family, it's a wound that never closes. Because when a child vanishes, time doesn't move forward. It just circles back, to the day everything stopped. If you know anything, no matter how small, that could help bring answers to the Lamont family, please contact local authorities, or reach out through the tip lines listed below. Because even the tiniest piece of truth could change everything. Too often, we move on from these stories. We scroll, we sigh, we forget. But for families like the Lamonts, forgetting isn't an option. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to Gus Lamont. Someone knows where that trail ended, and why a 6-year-old boy never came home. And maybe, that someone has convinced themselves it doesn't matter anymore. But it does. It always does. To everyone watching, please don't let this case fade into another unsolved headline. Share Gus's story. Keep his name alive in the algorithm, in conversations, and in the world's memory. Because every time we talk about him, every time we refuse to let silence win, we give his family just a little more strength to keep searching. If you have credible information, reach out. Every voice matters. And as always, thank you for watching Shanel Ben Report. Some mysteries end with answers. Others linger, haunting the people and places they touch. What do you think happened to Gus Lamont? Let me know, respectfully, in the comments below.